This is a sermon for November 19th, 2023. Compassion arises out of silence. First, I'll read from 1 John 3, 1 through 7. What marvelous love God has given us. Look, we're called children of God. That's who we really are. But that's also why the world doesn't recognize us or take us seriously, because it has no idea who God is or what God's up to. But friends, that's exactly who we are, children of God. And that's only the beginning. Who knows how we'll end up? The Word of life appeared. The infinite life of God took shape before us. This is the message. God is light. If we walk in the light, God being the light, we also experience a shared life with one another. Well, a friend of mine lives in New Mexico, and she has studied art and ecology. And she has been on a retreat at a nature center learning about ecology chaplaincy. And that's a growing field. I had to look it up myself because I didn't know. But the chaplain walks alongside people who work on healing the earth and are grieving the changes in climate and ecosystems and with the loss of species. So these are severe issues, and a lot of people are depressed about them. And the chaplain tries to help these people by walking with them and by also being a witness to how the earth is changing. So the training for ecology chaplaincy, now this is not something I'm going into, but I did want to look it up. But the training focuses on three things. First is not knowing. So letting go of all of the assumptions that we carry that keep us from seeing things as they are. So if we embrace not knowing, then we can learn. And so that's the first idea. The second principle is being present for all that arises. So just like we can be present for one another, no matter what the other person brings up, if we're present, we give them a space, like a hospitality. So being present, and for all that arises, whether in nature, whether with people, whether learning, no matter what it is, if we could be present. So that's the second principle. And the third principle is compassionate action, which comes from discernment. So that sense of wisdom where you learn what to do, and a settled heart and mind. So if we can be quiet and at peace and calm, settled heart and mind, it contributes to that hospitality that we can offer others. So she was telling us, she was at a retreat. She's not doing the ecology chaplaincy training, but she was at a retreat where they do teach this. And she was telling us about the phrase, slow down. She reminded me of something that I've heard since I went to seminary 38 years ago. And that phrase I learned in seminary is the tyranny of the urgent. So I was taught that in seminary, the tyranny of the urgent. So it may not be important, but it's urgent. And you better hop on it right away. And it's urgent, but it may or may not be important. So, but this concept of slow down, we learned this. Hurry, scurry, urgent will not lead to skillful work and will not help you accomplish what you hope to do. So when you're in a hurry, be sure to slow down. Or I think I remember this from childhood, the more hurrieder you go, the behinder you get. And I may not have the words right, but the hurrieder you go, the behinder you get. And many of these phrases, these all say the same thing. We must slow down and we must consider silence in order to accomplish what our hearts set out to do. What's truly important, what matters the most. If we can get quiet, or better, silence, and we can not know so that we're open to what actually arises, to be present and to do compassionate action. These are things that will help us work skillfully. We tend to rush through life with our assumptions fixed firmly in place about the way things are. And then we can't see what might be right in front of us because we're not open to it. A student went to a Zen teacher who advised the student to meditate for 1 hour per day. The student said, "Oh, I could never do that. There's way too much to do. I must use all the time I have available to accomplish as much as possible." "Oh, okay," said the Zen teacher. "Given those facts, then I know what you must do. You must meditate for 2 hours per day." So I've seen historical documents from 100 years ago to 500 years ago, boggles the mind, that bemoan how little silence there is and how everyone is in such a terrible hurry and how chaotic everything feels as people rush this direction and that direction. When I think how busy and noisy and crazy and tyranny of the urgent the time is that we live in now, I can't imagine people thinking that 100 years ago. And yet they did, and they wrote about it. Or even 500 years ago. Not in this country with white people, but different places in Europe. Even in China, I think they've made comments about how, oh, there's just too much urgency, there's too much busyness, too much noise. So yeah, don't you feel that our rushing around and the noise is so much worse now than even 5 years ago? It seems to be accelerating, the noise and the rushing around. If you ask someone how they are, "Oh, it's just crazy. It's been crazy," meaning I'm too busy to even answer your question. But 5 years ago, it was a little more calm. This is a downfall of mine, rushing, trying to cram more into every day, and not seeing what might be arising, not open to the surprise, not open to greater creativity. So the more silence that we can invite and be present in the silence, the more we might be able to have greater surprise and greater creativity. We're not going to get to surprise or creativity if we're rushing around and noisy. So, yeah, the path that arises out of silence and openness. If we are in a hurry and are convinced we are experts, are we going to be open to it? I don't think so. It feels nuts how chaotic things are with the church, with environmental health, with medical and insurance, politics, work, almost every field. There's this rushing. I can't try to fix the business world or politics or news organizations, but I can address the needs of the church for silence, openness, creativity, discernment, wisdom. These are the themes of the needs of the church. Amy, Bev Letcher's daughter, and I were talking about how disappointing the church is when it lifts purity laws above love. In other words, that's not who we are. We hate those people. Those are purity laws. And instead, love opens possibilities for accepting people that are different from us. We can love one another and still think critically about science without becoming bigoted against groups of people. Not every idea is equal to every other idea. We are given critical intellectual faculties for a reason. And we can love. I'm pretty sure there will be less fighting and less being mean If we can take time for silence and then allow compassionate action to arise out of the silence. Silence is a great place to begin and end the work of love, the work of the church, and our own growth as Christians. True peace is not the absence of war. True peace is people working together calmly, although they disagree on issues. True peace is reaching across differences and allowing for silence and surprise and creativity. Silence is not the absence of noise. Silence is being itself. There's no music without silence. All music and all words arise out of silence. Silence is not something high and lofty and rare. It's there when you wake from sleep. Silence is there when you begin to pray. Silence is on the water when the eagle flies from the tree branch and you hear the wind in its feathers. When have you experienced deep silence, and what was that like? What did you notice about silence? We can't capture silence. It captures us. Silence allows being open to know in new ways. Silence allows us to consider different perspectives. Silence allows us to find common ground. Silence allows us to see both ourselves and the other in the kind of compassion that Jesus holds for us and that we hold for one another. So within the silence, we see who we are, we see the other, we see the kind of love we can have for one another in Jesus. Noise and being busy, they keep us from considering love. In silence, we can consider and choose our thoughtful response rather than that knee-jerk reaction. Thinking, ego, arguing, staying busy, noise, these all lead us to react rather than thoughtfully, calmly respond. When we react, we choose sides. When we respond with compassion, we're including others in our perspective. I've always loved the little poem that goes, "He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." In all the noise of our busy, busy modern world, words mean less and less. They mean whatever ego wants them to mean. Hatred, anger, choosing sides, the noise and the misuse of words, twisting what is clearly true. All of this leads to argument, fighting, us against them. They are other, they are demonic. What if we begin in silence and prayer and compassion? Silence and open consideration could lead to less fighting. Silence and open consideration could lead to less acting like a 2-year-old. I want it my way. What matters in life more than love? If we start with silence, then in love we speak the purpose of the church. Why do you come to church? What do you get? What challenge do you receive? How does the church move you to live Christ's love, Christ's compassionate action? So, especially in the church, if we begin in silence, it's a laying down of the ego, which is about arguing and my way. And silence, open consideration could lead to compassionate action. How do we best go about putting on our aprons and serving others, like it says in Luke? What is our message? And how is it different from the world's message? How do we help the suffering people like Jesus did? I think no matter how we go about helping others, we can do it by beginning in silence. Amen.